President Obama's campaign slogan was, and President Zuma's campaign slogan is, yes, we can. Today, I want to start off with 3 anecdotes, and they are all linked to a common theme. When my brother turned 50, he decided to have his birthday party at the Grand West Casino. My daughter, who was 12 at the time, resolutely said, "This is a Christian family, and they go to a gambling casino for a party. I am not going. I've just done a project on gambling and its effects on the poor, and so I don't care if I stay alone at home." I was gobsmacked that my daughter could cite statistics about the effects of gambling on society and how it exacerbates the poverty of the poor. I had no option but to respect her wishes, and I stayed at home with her. Similarly, not so long ago, I went to the Africa Innovations Awards event at one of our prestigious business schools. The businessman who sponsored the event is involved in what I consider to be a lot of government scandals, and I wrote to the business school expressing my disappointment, asking them how they could reconcile teaching business ethics when they accept sponsorship from someone who is tainted. Needless to say, I got no response. In a society riddled with corruption, from the legislature to big business to municipalities, one is confronted with this ambivalence all the time. I'm reminded of my own hubris when I was told by the University of Uppsala in Sweden that they decided to confer an honorary doctorate on me in 1999. So off I toddled to Sweden for the ceremony, and it lasted 4 hours in Latin. Afterwards, we drove to the castle for a spectacular celebration which ended in a ball. After the reception, we walked to the parking lot, and my host walked past her car. And I said to her, "Frida, you're walking past your car." And she said, "I had a glass of wine and we don't drive." At the time, I was a human rights commissioner, and I said to her, "Hey, just drive, nobody will know. I'm not going to walk in my high heels." And she turned to me aghast and said, "In Sweden, we just don't do that." When I turned around, I saw everyone in their finery either walking home or calling a taxi to take them home. We just don't do that. Stuck with me ever since. I realized that in Sweden, ethics has become woven into the DNA of the national consciousness. It had become systemic, and it was part of the culture of business, politics, and daily life. It was part of the national fabric. It was part and parcel of their DNA. So these anecdotes remind me of what Oprah once said: real integrity is doing the right thing, knowing that nobody's going to know whether you did it or not. So the question is, why are we South Africans not like the Swedes? Why are we not as innocent as my daughter, who at an early age knew what was right and wrong? Why do universities teach business ethics, yet take money from tainted people? Unlike Sweden, in South Africa, the culture of impunity has seeped into public life. It has become part of the moral code of the president, of members of parliament, remember the travel scandal, the police, big business, government, universities, and so on. Just this morning on the news, President Zuma said there's nothing wrong with taking $1 billion, giving it to an NGO of which his cousin is the head. That was headline news today. So we have one law for politicians and another for ordinary citizens. Politicians can steal billions and remain unpunished, while a poor woman who shoplifts will go to jail. So once this happens, everyone will try to cheat and beat the system and get away with it. Everyone loses respect for the rule of law and government becomes lax about reinforcing it. The going mantra in the whole world and in South Africa in particular, it's just human nature. But you know what? Human nature has proven to be untrustworthy at the best of times. And that is why we need checks and balances to keep us on the right road. The Constitution, the law, regulations, and moral ethical codes stemming from our faith or morality are meant to keep us on the straight and narrow. And that is why we have a constitution. It's to protect the governed from those who govern. And we often forget why we have a constitution. Now, ethical behavior at the best of times is difficult, and it has dire consequences for those who want to do the right thing. Point number 1, it takes courage to be ethical. Consequences of ethical behavior can be dire. Whistleblowers are treated like lepers in our society, and many also disappear from the public domain, and some die in obscurity. The guy who exposed our Speaker of Parliament, who is now the national chairman of the ANC, he exposed her for acquiring a fraudulent license. His name was John Miller. He died in penury while her career just mobilized upward and upward. It is particularly hard when one sees how the corrupt are being rewarded with promotions and so on, while those with integrity are punished. There is no bigger challenge than knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do. Secondly, being ethical, being honest, is unpopular. Taking an ethical stance can make you deeply unpopular. By standing up for what is right, one unwittingly becomes a conscience, a goody two-shoes, and so on. You are excluded from invitation lists. People give you a wide berth. They gossip and discuss your life, and they quietly wish you would just go away. Being unpopular in a sea of corruption is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be painful. But we need to know, and I heard this quote from someone, if someone wants to lead the orchestra, they must turn their back on the crowd. Honesty is never seen to be sitting astride the fence. Another challenge to unethical behavior is that our vested interests, people's personal vested interests, especially in government, are often passed off as the national interest. And my question to government is, who determines what is in the national interest? When Thabo Mbeki said HIV does not cause AIDS, was that his own vested interest, or was it in the good of the nation? South Africa is in trouble because those in power who put their interests first above the nation, because of those who put their vested interests above those of the nation. They also have the cheek to treat their vested interests as those of the nation. And those of us who dare to criticize, if you're white, you're called a disloyal, a racist. If you're black, you're called a traitor and unpatriotic. But I wish to argue that the highest form of patriotism is to be critical, is to ask questions, and to demand loyalty. And then, lastly, unethical behavior is unsustainable. It is simply unsustainable. It is costly. It drains the country of its resources. It makes people unhappy. And it digs a hole that pulls everyone into it. The financial crisis in Western capitalism was due to the unbridled accumulation of wealth by the wealthy with no checks and balances. The collapse of Wall Street, Lehman Brothers, the big banks, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, was due largely to unethical behavior that had become systemic. Here in South Africa, debt is increasing because we spend more than we have. Corruption is out of control. And whereas in the past we were shocked by the theft of 1 million, now 1 billion does not even shock us. South Africa needs a moral truth commission. It was Jacob Zuma and Thabo Mbeki who started the moral regeneration project. And it failed because moral regeneration cannot be promoted by moral degenerates. Unless we change our ways, the lack of personal, political, and corporate integrity will become second nature to South Africans and indeed the world. Worse, it will be passed on from generation to generation, and we simply cannot afford to continue on this path. In conclusion, I look forward to the day that we in South Africa turn to one another and say, we just don't do that. Maybe we can start right here now by altering the phrase to, I just won't do that. Thank you.